Lorraine Kelly's morning show was supposed to be lighthearted that day, cheerful chatter, celebrity charm, and a sprinkle of gossip. But the atmosphere in the studio shifted the moment Hugh Grant walked in. The beloved British actor, known for his dry wit and occasional impatience, seemed unusually tense. Lorraine, ever the professional, greeted him with her trademark smile. "Good morning, Hugh. Always a pleasure to have you on the show," she began. Hugh forced a thin smile. "Morning, Lorraine. Let's get this over with, shall we?" The audience chuckled, thinking he was joking. But Lorraine's eyes narrowed slightly, she could sense something off. The interview was meant to promote his latest film The English Gentleman, a romantic drama set in post-war London. Yet from the very first question, sparks began to fly. "So, Hugh," Lorraine started, "you've played charming gentlemen your whole career, from Notting Hill to Love Actually. Do you ever get tired of playing the same type?" Hugh leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "That's a rather lazy question, isn't it? Maybe you should watch the film before asking." The audience gasped softly. Lorraine's practiced smile faltered for just a second. "Well," she replied, keeping her tone light, "I did watch it, Hugh. And I noticed a familiar touch, the same self-deprecating humor you're famous for." "That's called a style, Lorraine," he snapped. "Something journalists rarely understand." A nervous laugh rippled through the studio. The crew exchanged glances behind the cameras. Lorraine, unfazed, kept her poise. "I'm sure our viewers appreciate your honesty," she said carefully. "But let's talk about something lighter. You recently became a father again, didn't you?" That question hit a nerve. Hugh's expression darkened. "I don't discuss my children on television," he said sharply. Lorraine blinked. "Of course, I respect that," she replied. "But you've spoken before about how fatherhood has changed your outlook." "That was years ago," he interrupted, his voice rising. "You're dragging up personal things for entertainment. It's pathetic." The studio fell silent. Lorraine shifted slightly in her seat. "We only wanted to celebrate your achievements, Hugh. No one's attacking you." Hugh exhaled harshly, glaring toward the camera. "Then perhaps you should learn how to conduct a proper interview." Someone from the crew stepped forward, trying to signal for a break, but Lorraine raised a hand, she wasn't done yet. Her voice softened, but her words carried weight. "Hugh, people admire you, not just for your talent, but for your honesty. But there's a fine line between honesty and hostility. Are you sure this isn't about something else?" For a moment, Hugh looked as if he'd been struck. His jaw clenched. "You think you can psychoanalyze me on your show now?" he barked. "I think," Lorraine said calmly, "that something's clearly bothering you, and maybe it's not me." The audience was glued to the tension. Hugh stood up abruptly, removing his microphone. "I don't have to listen to this." Lorraine stood too, still graceful, still smiling. "You're free to leave, Hugh. But maybe next time, remember, the world isn't against you." Hugh froze mid-step. For a split second, the charming actor everyone adored flickered through, vulnerable, human, and oddly sad. But pride won. He stormed off the set without another word, cameras still rolling. The control room panicked, unsure whether to cut to commercial or keep broadcasting. Lorraine turned to the stunned audience and gave a soft, measured laugh. "Well," she said, "that was unexpected. We'll be right back after the break." As the lights dimmed and the theme music played, Lorraine sat back in her chair, her smile fading at last. Behind the scenes, producers rushed toward her, asking if she was all right. She nodded, though her mind was racing. Moments later, her assistant whispered, "He's gone. Straight out the door. Didn't even wait for his car." Lorraine sighed. "He's been through a lot lately, hasn't he?" "Yes," the assistant replied quietly. "Rumors say he's had some personal troubles, something about his last film's failure, and, well, family issues." Lorraine nodded slowly. "Fame doesn't shield anyone from pain," she murmured. Outside, cameras caught Hugh stepping into the cold London air, jaw tight, eyes distant. The paparazzi shouted questions, about the argument, about his temper, but he ignored them. The morning sun hit his face, revealing something no camera could quite capture: exhaustion. He wasn't angry at Lorraine. Not really. He was angry at himself, for the film that flopped, for the family he barely saw, for the reputation he could no longer control. In a nearby cafe, a television replayed the clip already circulating online. The headline read, Hugh Grant storms off Lorraine Kelly show in shock meltdown. A barista shook her head. Poor man. Doesn't look like himself anymore. Back in the ITV studio, Lorraine sat alone after filming, sipping her tea. Despite the chaos, she felt no resentment, only concern. She'd seen stars crumble under pressure before. Hugh was just another soul caught between fame and loneliness. As the studio emptied, Lorraine whispered to herself, maybe one day, he'll come back. And we'll have that conversation properly, without the walls. But for now, all Britain would remember was the headline, not the hurt behind it. The fallout began before Lorraine's show even ended. Clips of Hugh Grant storming off live TV flooded social media, with millions of views within an hour. Twitter was ablaze. Greater than, classic Hugh Grant meltdown, awkward but iconic. Lorraine handled that like a queen. He's clearly struggling. Hope he's okay. By noon, headlines from every outlet in London screamed the same story: Hugh Grant loses his temper on live TV. His publicist's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Meanwhile, Lorraine sat quietly in her dressing room, her tea long gone cold. The confrontation replayed in her mind, every word, every look. She didn't regret how she handled it, but something in Hugh's eyes before he walked away still haunted her. There had been pain, not arrogance. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Her producer, Sophie, stepped in holding her tablet. Lorraine, ITV's trending everywhere. They're asking if we want to issue a statement. Lorraine sighed. What kind of statement? Sophie hesitated. Something about professionalism, or maybe sympathy. You know, to calm the noise. Lorraine smiled faintly. No, let's not make it a war of words. Just say we wish you all the best. Sophie nodded. Simple. Elegant. Got it. As the producer left, Lorraine turned to the mirror. She'd been doing this for decades, interviewing politicians, royals, and movie stars. But few moments had rattled her like this one. What broke you, Hugh? She whispered under her breath. Across the city, Hugh sat alone in his flat overlooking the Thames. The phone buzzed endlessly, agents, journalists, even friends. He ignored them all. On the coffee table, the muted TV played the replay of his own outburst. Lorraine's calm voice contrasted painfully with his harsh tone. He threw the remote aside, pressing his palms to his face. Brilliant, Hugh. Another disaster. His assistant, Emily, called again. He finally answered. Don't, he said flatly. Hugh, you can't hide. Everyone's talking about it. Maybe issue an apology. He exhaled. And admit I'm the villain again. Not this time. You're not the villain. You're human. Her words hung in the air. Hugh leaned back, staring out the window. Human. That was the part everyone forgot. That evening, ITV replayed the episode. Public curiosity was at its peak. Analysts dissected every second, tabloids exaggerated every pause. Yet a surprising thing happened: viewers began to sympathize with both of them. On one side were fans defending Hugh's right to privacy. On the other, those praising Lorraine's grace under pressure. But amid the noise, a quiet narrative began to emerge. Hugh Grant looked broken. A day later, a handwritten note arrived at ITV studios. The receptionist read it, stunned, and hurried it straight to Lorraine's office. It was short, written in sharp but elegant handwriting. Greater than, Lorraine, I owe you an apology. I was out of line. You were kind, I was not. Thank you for your patience. Hugh. Lorraine smiled as she read it. She placed the letter down gently. He did have a conscience after all, she murmured. That night, during her show's closing segment, Lorraine addressed the audience directly. I know many of you watched yesterday's interview. It wasn't our finest hour, for either of us. But sometimes, live television captures something real: frustration, pain, misunderstanding. Hugh Grant is a talented man who's given the world decades of joy. I only wish him peace and strength moving forward. Her voice was soft but steady. The audience applauded warmly. That clip, too, went viral, but this time for all the right reasons. Even Hugh's publicist called, smiling. You're trending again, but this time it's heartwarming. Later that week, Hugh appeared at a charity gala, avoiding questions about the incident. Yet one reporter asked gently, Hugh, have you spoken to Lorraine Kelly since the interview? He paused, giving a rare, genuine smile. I sent her a letter. She deserved that much. Maybe one day, I'll go back on her show, with an actual smile this time. The room erupted in laughter, and for once, Hugh laughed too. Backstage, as the gala ended, he found himself thinking of Lorraine's parting words, "The world isn't against you." He realized she had been right. His anger hadn't been at her, it had been at himself, for losing control, for the years he'd spent building walls, for the fear of vulnerability that came with fame. A week later, ITV received another envelope. This time, it wasn't a letter. It was a small framed photograph, a candid shot taken years ago of Hugh laughing on Lorraine's show, back when both were younger and freer. Beneath it, a single line written in ink. Greater than, "Let's start again someday," with T, not tension, H. Lorraine placed it on her desk, smiling softly. "T it is," she whispered. Months passed, and both moved on with their busy lives. But every time Lorraine interviewed a difficult guest, she remembered that day, not as a failure, but as proof that even the sharpest words can lead to quiet understanding. And Hugh. He began choosing interviews more carefully, not to avoid confrontation, but to ensure he was ready to face the world without hiding behind sarcasm. Years later, when he finally returned to Lorraine's show, the audience erupted in applause before he even spoke. Lorraine grinned. "No storming off today, I hope." Hugh laughed, eyes bright. "Not unless you ask me about my hair again." Laughter filled the studio, the kind that heals. The cameras rolled, and this time, the conversation was warm, respectful, and deeply human. Because sometimes, the hardest clashes lead to the most genuine connections.